On the night of Saturday, January 6, 2007, Christopher Newsom and his girlfriend Channon Christian went out together for the last time. Newsom was a 23-year-old carpenter, Christian a 21-year-old senior majoring in sociology at the University of Tennessee. The couple had been dating for about 2 months and seemed very much smitten with each other. That Saturday night, the couple had eaten a romantic dinner at a Knoxville restaurant. Channon last spoke with her mother, Denna, at roughly 12:35 a.m. on Sunday, when Channon said the couple was going to visit a friend to watch some movies. No one ever heard from them again. At 12:24 p.m. Sunday, Christopher's burned corpse was found by a Norfolk Southern Railroad employee near the railroad tracks in a rough area on the north side of Knoxville, Tennessee. The next day, Channon's Toyota 4Runner was located a few blocks away. It was actually found by Channon's parents, who were canvassing the area after the cell phone company gave police the last known location of their daughter's cell phone. Channon was nowhere to be found, but crime scene technicians lifted a print from an envelope found in the SUV. Analysis matched the print to Lamarcus Davidson, a recently released ex-con living in the area. Knoxville Police and Knox County Sheriff's Department investigators got a search warrant for Davidson's home at 2316 Chipman Street. By Tuesday at 2 p.m., they located Channon Christian's body in a kitchen trash bin. The house was a rental property, but the renters were gone. Police were left with 2 corpses of a photogenic young couple who had been tortured and killed in the most brutal fashion anyone in Knoxville could remember. As information slowly emerged out of the investigation, it was clear that this was no ordinary crime. It apparently started with a carjacking, said U.S. Marshal Rich Knighton. They did some really nasty things to this lady. There's some evidence she was held and sexually abused for a couple of days. In fact, as police gathered more facts, it became clear that both Newsom and Christian were brutalized beyond imagination. In the wee hours of that Sunday morning, Newsom and Christian were carjacked at gunpoint in her parents' 2005 Toyota 4Runner and brought back to the house on Chipman. Christopher Newsom was raped over and over again. Semen was found in his anus and sodomized with an unknown object. He was blindfolded, gagged, and bound at the hands and feet. After several nightmarish hours, Newsom was either walked barefoot or dragged out to the railroad tracks, where he was shot in the back of the head execution style. The assailants shot him 2 more times, in the back and in the neck. Then Newsom's corpse was doused with gasoline and lit on fire. For Channon Christian, the torture was even worse. She suffered days of sexual abuse in the Chipman home. She was beaten mercilessly and raped numerous times, suffering excruciating injuries to her mouth, vagina, and anus. Forensic pathologists found not only was Christian raped by her captors, but she'd been penetrated with an object as well, possibly a chair leg, according to the Knox County medical examiner. In addition, examiners found that a chemical, likely bleach, had been poured down her throat and in her wounded genital areas while she was still alive. The coroner reported that Christian was then tied up with torn strips of bedding, her head covered in a white garbage bag, and then the whole body stuffed in 5 larger trash bags before being thrown out in a garbage can. Perhaps the most horrifying finding was that Christian was still alive at the time. Her death came after the slow process of suffocation in that trash container. Police immediately began searching for the renter of 2316 Chipman Street, a convicted felon named Lamarcus Davidson. Davidson had recently finished a 5-year prison sentence for a previous carjacking and robbery charge. Law enforcement also sought Davidson's brother, Letalvis Cobbins. By Wednesday, January the 11th, 2007, authorities had arrested Davidson in Knoxville. Cobbins and his friend George Thomas were picked up by U.S. Marshals in Lebanon, Kentucky. Further investigation led to the arrest of Cobbins' girlfriend, Vanessa Coleman, who witnessed the kidnapped couple in the house on Chipman Street. On January 31st, 2007, a grand jury handed down a 46-count indictment against the 4 defendants. The attackers would be tried separately, But the first person convicted in the case would be a man who had no contact with Newsom or Christian. Dwayne Boyd was convicted by a federal jury on April 16, 2008, as an accessory to the carjacking for his role in hiding Davidson in the days after the killings. He'd be sentenced to 18 years in prison. On August 25, 2009, a Davidson County jury. There was too much media coverage to find an impartial jury in Knox County, so a jury was bussed in from Nashville and sequestered, convicted 26-year-old Letalvis Cobbins of the first-degree murder and rape of Channon Christian. He was acquitted for the Newsom rape counts and convicted of a lesser facilitation charge in regard to Newsom's death. Prosecutors had called Cobbins the second-in-command during the crimes and had used forensic investigation to link Cobbins' DNA to the victim's remains. Cobbins took the stand in his own defense, telling jurors that he had consensual oral sex with Christian, offered with the promise that he'd set her free afterward. But he conceded that he'd left her in captivity afterward and admitted that he was present when Christian was stuffed in the garbage can and left to die. Jurors ultimately opted to spare Cobbins from the death penalty and instead found he should be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The next defendant to stand trial was 28-year-old Lamarcus Davidson, the man who rented the house in which the crimes took place and who, prosecutors said, planned the rapes and murders. At trial, the state linked Davidson to a fingerprint in Christian's Toyota and to the gun believed to be the murder weapon in Newsom's murder. Davidson's DNA was found on Christian, but not on Newsom. On October 28, 2009, Davidson was convicted on 35 of 38 total counts. He wasn't convicted of raping Newsom, including the first-degree murder of both victims. The penalty phase started the next day. The jury was sent back to decide Davidson's fate on October 30, 2009. After approximately 3 hours of deliberation, the panel sentenced the ringleader to death by lethal injection. George Thomas, 26, was a friend of Letalvis Cobbins and the third man to be tried for the murder-rape of Christian and Newsom. Thomas's defense attorneys had the best shot at an acquittal thus far, as there was no DNA, fingerprint, or eyewitness evidence against their client. Thomas had admitted being in the Chipman Street house at the time, but denied taking part in any crimes against the couple. Regardless, the evidence was strong enough for a Hamilton County jury to hand down 38 guilty verdicts, including first-degree murder, rape, robbery, and kidnapping. The verdict came down on December 8, 2009. 2 days later, that same jury recommended Thomas serve a sentence of life imprisonment with no chance of parole. The last trial would be the most difficult for prosecutors. 21-year-old Vanessa Coleman, Letalvis Cobbins' girlfriend, admitted being at the house and witnessing the strangling of Channon Christian. But she said she was paralyzed by fear and that she'd been threatened with harm if she tried to leave and alert authorities. Moreover, there was no forensic evidence linking her to either victim. On May 13, 2010, Coleman was acquitted of the first-degree murder of Christian and of all charges pertaining to Newsom. However, she was convicted of facilitation in the murder and rapes of Christian. On July 30, 2010, Judge Richard Baumgartner rejected the defense's plea for leniency and sentenced Coleman to 53 years behind bars. With the last of the trials done and the defendants behind bars for decades, the terrible story seemed to be over. But this case had been sensational from the start, and there would be more controversy to come. Although the horrors inflicted upon Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom were luridly savage, the national news media was slow to pick up the story. Conservative commentators and right-wing blogs insisted that the crimes were being ignored by mainstream media out of a perverse sense of political correctness, simply because the victims were white and the suspects were black. TV pundit and conservative columnist Michelle Malkin said, "There's a discomfort level with stories that have black assailants and white victims. If it doesn't fit some sort of premeditated narrative of how we view taboo subjects like race and crime, there's a disinclination to cover it." The controversy over the media's treatment of the killings spilled onto the streets of Knoxville on May 26, 2007, when 30 or so white supremacists gathered to protest the perceived lack of coverage. Hal Turner, an internet talk show host, summed up the protest's objectives with abrasive rhetoric. The goal of this rally is twofold. We want to tell the liberal media we're tired of them spiking stories about black-on-white crime. Our second goal is to tell the black community they have to restrain their black hoodlums. A throng of social activists calling themselves the Ku Klux Clowns showed up in clown makeup to stage a counter-protest. Although Knoxville police deemed the event fairly orderly, they ended up arresting white supremacist organizer Alex Linder for disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. For its part, prosecutors denied the crimes, while undeniably appalling in nature, should be considered hate crimes. We have no evidence to support the notion that this was a race-based crime, said Knoxville Police Chief Sterling Owen. We see this as a cold-blooded murder. Those beliefs were echoed by Knox County DA Randy Nichols. It was a terrible crime, a horrendous crime, but race was not a motive. We know from our investigation that the people charged in this case were friends with white people, socialized with white people, dated white people. There's no evidence of any racial animus. There's evidence to the contrary. The victims of the family seemed somewhat conflicted about the idea of hate crime. Channon's father, Gary Christian, told reporters, "There are people out there that just want to make something even worse than what it already is. I think any kind of crime like that's a hate crime. Was it racial? No, I don't think so." Christopher's parents were less certain. Hugh Newsom opined to a local TV reporter, "Would they have done that to a black couple? I don't think so." Christopher's mother Mary added, "With all the things they did to them, what else could you call it but hate?" Knox County Criminal Court Judge Richard Baumgartner presided over all 4 high-profile trials of the Christian Newsom murder defendants. Promoted to the bench in 1992, Baumgartner had served without incident through most of the next 2 decades. But court watchers noted the judge could seem dazed and impaired at times. In 2010, Judge Baumgartner caused awkward moments just before the announcement of the jury's decision in the trial of Nessa Coleman, as he stumbled to correctly read over the verdict form. In January 2011, Baumgartner made a surprise decision to take a medical leave. That news was quickly followed by revelations that the judge was under criminal investigation. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, had found evidence that Baumgartner had obtained prescription pain medication from a felon named Christopher Lee Gibson, whose probation came before Judge Baumgartner. By March 2011, Judge Baumgartner had pled guilty to felony official misconduct. All of his prior cases would be put under strict scrutiny from defense attorneys and prosecutors alike. On December 1, 2011, Special Judge John Kerry Blackwood ruled that the trials of all 4 defendants, Lamarcus Davidson, Latalvis Cobbins, George Thomas, and Vanessa Coleman, were structurally flawed by Baumgartner's on-bench intoxication and would have to be done all over again. Citing the TBI probe into Baumgartner's pill-popping, Judge Blackwood said, "He committed a crime every day. That's every day he's sitting on this bench in this robe. There's no other conclusion this court can make but that there was structural error." That the cases will have to be tried again was bad news for prosecutors, but there was a more immediate effect as well. Because 3 of the 4 juries had rejected the death penalty already, only Davidson can face the ultimate punishment in his retrial. In March 2012, the Tennessee Attorney General's office stepped in to ask the State Court of Criminal Appeals to hold off on the new trials for the Christian Newsom defendants, but Knox County prosecutors were gearing up for retrials scheduled to begin in June 2012. All 4 defendants remained behind bars as they awaited their next day in court. Judge Blackwood announced he'd try the cases in Knox County, but select jurors from faraway counties who have not been tainted by the years of publicity. In the meantime, Lamarcus Davidson pled guilty to a robbery that took place in a Knoxville Pizza Hut on January 8, 2007, just a day after the killings. He received a sentence of 8 years for the robbery. That time would not be added to whatever punishment he's meted in his murder-rape retrial. The sentences would run concurrently. While the families of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom must get set to relive the tragic events again and again in a series of retrials, supporters were able to remember the loss in a positive way. On March 26, 2012, the Christopher Newsom Memorial Baseball Tournament was held at Halls Community Park in Knoxville. Proceeds from gate fees and t-shirt sales were put into a scholarship fund in Newsom's name to provide scholarships for graduating seniors of Halls High School, Newsom's alma mater. Vanessa Coleman, the only female charged and convicted in the crimes, is held at the Tennessee Prison for Women, now known as the Deborah K. Johnson Rehabilitation Center in Nashville. Serving a 35-year sentence, Coleman was eligible for parole in 2017, and her sentence expires on April 18, 2036. In August 2014, the families of the victims were notified that, with good behavior, Coleman's sentence was being reduced to 16 days per month of incarceration, making her eligible for parole consideration in October 2014. The parole hearing was rescheduled from October to December. At the December 2014 hearing, Coleman was denied parole, and her next parole consideration date was set for December 2020. Coleman again went before a parole board on December 8, 2020. Christian and Newsom's mothers and Christian's father gave statements to the board opposing parole. The 7 board members voted unanimously to deny Coleman parole and ensure that she would not be eligible to go before a parole board again for 10 years. Cobbins and Thomas were originally incarcerated at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Nashville. After the Bledsoe County Correctional Complex in Pikeville opened in 2012, they were transferred to that facility. Cobbins is currently serving a life sentence without parole at the Northwest Correctional Complex. Thomas is incarcerated at the Northeast Correctional Complex. His sentence ends in May 2053. Davidson was sentenced to death on October 30, 2009, and is incarcerated at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. Eric Boyd, who had been serving his sentence of 18 years at Federal Correctional Institution, Beckley, a medium-security prison near Beaver, West Virginia, was potentially eligible for release in 2022, but found guilty on charges of rape and first-degree murder on August 13, 2019. He was immediately sentenced to life in prison by the judge, who stated that a life sentence was automatic for the murder conviction. Boyd is incarcerated at the Bledsoe County Correctional Complex.